Every day you fill your cat's water bowl. You set it down, maybe right next to their food, and don't think much of it. It feels obvious. They need water, you give them water. But if you watch closely, a lot of cats don't treat it that way. They'll walk past it, slow down for a second, and keep going. Sometimes they stop, take a couple quick sips, then leave like something isn't quite right. And other times they ignore it completely and go somewhere else. The sink, the shower floor, even a glass you left on the table. At first it just feels random, but the more you notice it, the more consistent it starts to look. It's not that they don't see the water, it's that the situation around it doesn't fully make sense to them. If you step back and think about how a cat experiences their environment, it's very different from how we do. We see a bowl placed in a convenient spot. They experience a location, a scent, a level of activity, and a sense of exposure all at once. And those things carry more weight than the water itself. In the environments cats come from, water wasn't something that appeared in predictable places. It had to be found, and more importantly, it had to feel safe before it was used. That left behind a few quiet patterns that still show up now, even in a house. Water that moves tends to feel safer than water that sits still. Water that's separate from food tends to feel safer than water that's close to it. And the space around the water matters just as much as the water itself. So when a bowl is placed right next to food, in a busy part of the house, with no movement at all, it can create a kind of mismatch. Nothing about it is clearly wrong, but several small things don't quite line up. And that hesitation you see is usually where that shows up first. You can catch it in small moments. A cat walks up, pauses, looks at the bowl, then glances around the room before deciding what to do. Some will tap the surface lightly with their paw. Others lean in, take a sip, then pull back and reassess. That pause is doing more work than it looks like. Cats rely heavily on movement when they're focusing on something up close. When water is completely still, it doesn't always stand out clearly. So when they touch it and create ripples, they're not playing with it, they're making it easier to read. The movement gives them something to lock onto. But here's where it gets interesting. If you put that same water in two different places, same bowl, same room, just a few feet apart, a lot of cats will treat them completely differently. One gets ignored, the other gets used without hesitation. Nothing about the water changed, only the context did. And that's usually the part people miss. Because even after they test the surface, they're still taking in everything else. Where they are in the room, how open the space feels, what they can smell, how much activity is around them. If one of those feels slightly off, it can be enough to keep them from settling in. You might notice your cat drinks more at certain times of day, late at night when everything is quiet, or early in the morning before there's movement in the house. The setup hasn't changed, but the environment around it has, and that alone can shift how comfortable it feels. Smell plays into this more than we usually realize. Even when a bowl looks completely clean, there's more going on than we can detect. The water itself carries a scent, especially depending on where it comes from. The material of the bowl adds to it. Even the air in that part of the room changes how it comes across. Cats take all of that in together. Over time, a spot that technically hasn't changed can start to feel different to them. Slightly less fresh, slightly less clear. And instead of forcing it, they just move on and check somewhere else. You can see this more clearly in everyday moments. You fill their bowl in the kitchen, but later that night you hear a faint drip in the sink. They walk in, hop up, and drink without hesitation. No testing, no pause, no second look. Or you leave a glass of water on your nightstand, and somehow that becomes the most interesting water in the house. Those moments aren't random. Those spots usually share a few things. They're separate from where they eat. They feel more open or slightly elevated, and there's usually some kind of movement or freshness to them, even if it's subtle. If you watch closely, the difference in behavior is clear. At the bowl, they hesitate. At those other spots, they don't. It's not that those sources are better. They just line up more cleanly with what their instincts expect. And sometimes it's not about fully rejecting the bowl either. A lot of cats still use it, just in a different way. Smaller sips, more spread out, less time spent there overall. It becomes something they check, not something they rely on. That's where small changes can shift things pretty quickly. Moving the water even a short distance away from the food can change how often they return to it. It separates those two signals in a way that feels more natural. Adding a second bowl in another part of the house gives them a choice, and that alone can make it easier for them to settle into one of them. Placement matters more than precision. Some cats prefer a slightly enclosed corner where they feel protected. Others drink more in open areas where they can see everything around them. You don't have to get it perfect, but giving them options usually makes a difference. Adding movement tends to have the biggest impact. A small fountain or anything that keeps the surface active changes how the water reads to them right away. It gives them something consistent to focus on, instead of something they have to test every time. When things start to line up, the change is noticeable but not dramatic. They hesitate less. They don't need to check the room as much. They stay a little longer, and they come back more often without thinking about it. It doesn't feel like a behavior change, it just feels smoother. And once you see that shift, something clicks. It wasn't about the water being wrong. It was about the setup being slightly out of sync with how they decide something is safe. That's why the same cat that ignores a full bowl can walk straight to a faucet and drink without hesitation. One situation almost works. The other one fully does. If you've seen your cat do that, you've already watched this play out in real time. It's just easy to miss what's actually driving it. And once you start paying attention to where they choose to drink and how they approach it, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. It's not random. It's not them being picky. It's just what makes sense to them. And when the setup finally matches that, you don't really have to encourage them anymore. They just use it.